All right, so let's talk about the new chart of accounts experience in QuickBooks Online. So the way Intuit usually rolls out new features is that they send the feature out to a certain group of customers, and they kind of get feedback, and then they either adjust or they take away the feature or they roll it out to more and more people. And I believe this feature originally started being rolled out about 6 months ago in the middle of 2022. And so because of that, I figured now, since it's been 6 months and this is still the chart of accounts workflow that's in the software now, I figured now's a good time to teach you guys how to use it, because it seems at this point like it could be around like this for a while. But also keep in mind, of course, that this could change it at any moment. I'm just logged in here into a new QuickBooks Online file. And first we'll go into the chart of accounts. So going into the actual chart of accounts, you go into the gear icon here in the top right. And then under your company, you see chart of accounts here. So you can click on that. And then here we're looking at the chart of accounts. And what the chart of accounts are basically the categories within your profit and loss and balance sheet reports. So your income accounts, your expense accounts, your equity accounts, assets, liabilities, things like that. So that's what we're doing here. And so this screen here looks the same as it did before. This chart of account screen. Where it's different is when you start adding new ones. That's where the experience looks a little bit different than how it was before. And before I start getting into how to actually add new chart of accounts, I just want to quickly go over a few things that'll make more sense, I think, if I really fully explain it first before we start adding new ones. And the first one is exactly what we're looking at here in the chart of accounts. So we have the different types here. So it first starts out with balance sheet accounts, which are, like bank accounts, assets, liabilities, and equity accounts. And so that's what's listed up here first. And then as you scroll farther down, then you start getting into your profit and loss reports. So you have your income accounts, and then you have your cost of goods sold account, which is different than your expense accounts. And then you have your others. So you have your other income and other expense accounts. So that's the general layout of the chart of accounts. And again, you have the difference between the balance sheet and the profit and loss. And also another thing to know is that cost of goods sold is different than expenses. I'm not going to get too much into that in this video. But another thing to look at here is that you have, so this setup right here. So what this account right here would be called is a parent account in the cost or in the chart of accounts, this cost of goods sold here. And then you have these accounts underneath it, and those are called sub accounts. So it's basically a way to group together certain accounts under one parent big category. So that's what that looks like here. And there's many reasons why, this would be beneficial for you to potentially set up. So again, we see it here in expenses. So you have the parent advertising and marketing account, and then you have sub accounts underneath where you list out different kinds of advertising and marketing accounts. And I'm sure a lot of you probably already had these all set up in your chart of accounts, but I wanted to make sure that everyone fully understood when I move forward in this video of what I mean whenever I call something a parent account and a sub account. And for the purpose of this video, so all of these individual expense accounts, like these ones right here, to where there's no sub accounts underneath them, we're just going to call those separate parent accounts as well for the purposes of this video. One more thing to point out before we begin adding new chart of accounts is that there is a difference between, so right now we are in business view. So if you hit, again, the gear icon here, you'll see you're viewing it in business view. And then there's also what's called an accountant view. And if you hit this link here to switch to accountant view, then it switches you over to accountant view. And again, the chart of accounts looks the same, but it'll look different once you start adding new ones. So the screen will look different than what you see if you're looking at it in the business view. And we're going to go over both because both views have certain liabilities and pros and cons. And I believe that in order to get the full function of what I believe you should have access to when adding chart of accounts, you most likely could be switching back and using both of them, a combination of both. So we're going to go back to the business view to start. So now let's hit new. If we hit new here in the top right, we're going to start adding some chart of account accounts here. And again, these are the categories in your profit and loss and balance sheet to see how it looks different than what it did before. So this is the new screen here that we're looking at whenever we hit new. And so to begin, we have the category name, and then we have the create category under. So let's say at first, let's just say we're just going to create an expense account. Let's just call it marketing expense. So we can just put the name of it here, and then you'll see this create category under. So you hit select category here. And then, so this screen is new here. I will say that I don't like it. I don't like really any of this new chart of accounts entry system versus how it was before, but it is what it is. It's what we have now. So, we have to learn how to use it. And it's interesting how they list these out, and we'll go over a little bit more. We'll probably just add one of every account to get a full understanding. But for the expenses, it's straightforward. So the expenses, it has just here expenses listed out. So the cost of running your business. So we're going to hit that for expenses. And now here's where I really, this is where it's very limiting in your ability to add chart of accounts in the new system in the business view. So they don't give you the option at all to add a completely new expense category parent account. So your only option here is to create your new expense account under one of these already created parent accounts. So it's very limiting in that way. My guess is that it might help if they're wanting people to use something like TurboTax or something along those lines in order to bring their numbers over for tax returns, for tax purposes. Maybe they want it just to stay under only these parent accounts to facilitate that better than creating your own parent expense accounts. That could be the reason why. I'm not really sure. But either way, that's what you're limited to right now in this system, is only creating sub accounts. You can't create a brand new expense category, unfortunately. But again, we're going to go over here in a second. Once you go over to Accountant View, you will have the ability to do that. So in this particular case, so now we're looking at all of the parent expense accounts that are already in our chart of accounts, and we're going to choose which one we're going to put that under. So we're going to create a sub account. And in this particular case, it would make sense, and you can hit the arrow to see what's already under there. But in this case, it would make sense to put it, of course, under advertising and marketing. So we can select that, and then you can enter a description if you'd like, or keep it blank, whatever you want to do, and then you can hit save. And now if we scroll down to the expenses, we'll see this advertising and marketing parent account, and then we'll see the new marketing expense sub account listed underneath it. And again, if you want to add a different account like these are listed out, you don't have that ability currently with this new system. So now let's look at, I think what we'll do here is go over all the different accounts in the business view, and then we'll switch over to accountant, and then we'll review and kind of talk about how you can use both of them to the best of your advantage here. So let's create an income account now. So let's say we're going to create a consulting sales income account category here. So you put in the name, select the category. So this case, again, it's straightforward. If it's going to be an income account that's going to be in the top of your profit and loss, if you want it to be under other income at the bottom of your profit and loss, then you're going to have to go into this section, into the other account section. So if you click on that just to see, then you will see the other income. And again, you can't put it under any of these you can only put it under the other income parent account. But let's say in this case, this is going to be a main income account at the top of your profit and loss. So we hit next here. And then again, we have to put it under one of these accounts. And so if you don't have any of these set up, maybe most likely, so you can put it under the sales parent account, or there's a services parent account. Let's say for this example, we want it set up under services. So we can hit that, hit select, add a description if you want, hit save. And then if we go down to income, we'll see under the services income, there'll be a sub account of consulting sales. And this is what it'll look like on your profit and loss. So it'll have the services income amount, dollar amount, and then it'll have the sub account of consulting sales, and then it'll show that dollar amount as well on your profit and loss. So same thing if you're doing an other expense, it's going to be under here in this bottom section under these other expenses. And again, they don't even give you an option to put it under an other expense parent account, only depreciation, home office, and vehicle expenses. So again, I'm not a big fan of this at all, but that's where that would be if you're putting it in other expense. So in the last one, so we did other expense, income, and expense. So the last one would be on your profit and loss, because you have the main parent categories that you're putting this under. So you have income, cost of goods sold, expenses, other income, other expenses. And so the last one would be a cost of goods sold account, which again is different from expenses. We're not going to get into that too much in this video, but if you're adding a cost of goods sold, put the name in here, select category, and then so the cost of goods sold is going to be under expenses in this particular case. So you hit next, And then again, if you scroll down, you'll see here at cost of goods sold. And again, you could only put it as a sub account under cost of goods sold. So you choose that, hit select, put in a description if you want, and save. And then if you go down to your cost of goods sold, so now you'll see it's under this parent cost of goods sold account, you see the product cost. And so now on the business view, that's the profit and loss reports you can create. And again, you can only create them under parent accounts, as sub accounts in this case, unfortunately. But so now we can go over into the balance sheet kind of accounts and look into those. So for those accounts, you have your assets, which is broken out between current assets and fixed assets. And then you have liabilities, which is broken out between current liabilities and long-term liabilities. And then you have your equity accounts. So again, those are the main parent accounts on your balance sheet. And so in bank accounts will show up under current assets, and then credit cards are current liabilities. So first, let's look at bank accounts. So if you hit new here, again, put in the name, select category, and then you'll see here, there's a section here of bank and credit cards. So we can click on that, hit select, and then here you can select the account type. In this case, this is going to be a checking account. And then you can put in the starting balances here. This is the same as it was before. So you can put in the date and the dollar amount if you are putting in an opening balance. And if you are, make sure this is what you actually want to do. But again, this is another video discussion regarding opening balances. And you can put in a description if you want. And then we can hit save. And one thing that you might have noticed is that for the bank accounts, it didn't give us the option to put it as a subcategory. So for the profit and loss accounts, you only have the option to put it as a subcategory. And for the bank and asset balance sheet accounts, you only have the option to create a whole new parent account, and you don't have the option to put in subcategories. And where I think this is very limiting, so if we look at a credit card, select category, and then we'll go under bank and credit cards here, hit select, and then credit card. And again, we don't have any options here to put it under any sort of parent account. So this is the only thing we can do is just add a separate credit card. And the reason I like that is because there's a strategy, which I'll make in a tutorial on in another video, that if you have one credit card company and then you have multiple cards of different employees, sometimes whenever those different employees are using their cards, if you have it linked onto your bank feed, the credit card, it only shows the transactions coming into the bank feed from the main parent, and it doesn't bring in any of the transactions from the extra actual credit cards that the other employees have. And so you have to put them in manually or through like a PDF statement. But there is a way to counteract that if you set up a main credit card account and then you set up subcategories to that credit card account, and then you link all of those individual cards to those cards in QuickBooks, then that's a way to bring all those transactions into your bank feed. And again, this is getting a little too much in the weeds here, and this is another video to discuss how to actually do this. But just know it is possible to do that. But the only way to make that possible is if you create a parent credit card account and then sub accounts for the credit card. And in this particular case, it's not giving you the option at all to do that. But we'll go into that. If we go into accountant view, we will have that option. So again, you can only just create the one credit card here. You can't make any subcategories with this. And then again, opening balance here in description if you'd like. So now we have bank and credit cards. So now let's go start looking into assets. So in the assets section, you have fixed assets and then you have current assets. And so we're not going to get into too much of what those are, but one's usually if you plan on using it within a year or after a year, basically, is when you would categorize one for the other. But let's say, for example, we want to put in a current asset. So if you hit new here, so we're putting in a current asset here. And then, so this is where I think it gets really confusing. And I know what they're going for here. And what they're going for here is making this user-friendly for business owners who are not accountants or bookkeepers. And so they want to make it as straightforward as possible and not use too much technical accounting lingo. But in my opinion, you should know, if you're a business owner and you're doing your own accounting and bookkeeping, you should have a general idea of what you're doing whenever you're creating these accounts and putting dollar amounts into them. You should at the very least know the difference between a fixed asset and a current asset and which one you're wanting to create. And it's not very straightforward, I don't think, in this list here, because but how it was before, you can choose current asset or fixed asset. Now you kind of have to find it. So fixed assets are actually under expensive items, and current assets are actually under other accounts, which I think it doesn't make much sense to me. But again, that's what they're going for, is trying to make it user friendly for people who are not very up on their accounting technical terms and workflows. So again, the current assets are, in this case, going to be under other accounts. But again, though, they do a good job here of putting a little description here. So assets to be used or sold within a year and income not from the business's regular work. So they do a good job of putting in the description here a little bit of what this could entail. And so we're going to choose that. And then so it's not other income. So here we have the short-term or current assets. And then again, we can only choose here between one of these sub-accounts. So in some cases on the balance sheet accounts, you can only create parent accounts, and in some cases, you can only create sub-accounts. So let's say, for example, this one would be prepaid expenses, and then we'll hit select. And that'd be listed under the current assets. So now let's look at fixed assets. So if you hit new here in the top right, so we have land here, so select category. So fixed assets are going to be under expensive items. And it's expensive items the business will use for longer than a year. So this is where your fixed assets are going to be. So if you click on that, hit next, and then again, same deal, only create a sub account, can't create parent accounts for this. So you have to put them under one of these categories. In this case, of course, is going to be land. But what I'm doing here, I haven't memorized all these categories. So you wouldn't create, if you did have land, or like I just did before, prepaid expenses, you wouldn't create a new one and create a subcategory like I'm doing here. I just didn't know the names of all of them. So I'm just showing you for this sake of creating a sub account. So how it shows up in fixed assets is you have the parent account and the sub account. But again, you wouldn't want to create just sub accounts like this if it's the same thing, if it's the same name and everything. So now let's look at some liabilities outside of credit cards. So again, you have current liabilities and long-term liabilities. So you can hit new here. Let's say we took out a loan that's due within a year. So in this particular case, so this is going to be under loans and money owed. And so in this category, both the current assets and the long-term assets are both going to be under this one loans and money owed account. So if you click on that, hit next, then it splits out at this point between current and long-term liabilities, the short-term and long-term, how they have it here. So again, same deal, put it under one of these accounts, so I have the option to make a new one. So in this case, again, we're creating a short-term, and let's call it lines of credit. So you can add a description if you want, save it. And again, this is going to be on your balance sheet, other current liabilities, lines of credit, short-term loan. Now long-term liability, again, put the name under the same account here, loans and money owed, hit next, and then we're going to be looking at long-term liabilities. And again, you can only have these two options here. We're going to put it under long-term business loans, hit select, and save. And that's going to show up on your balance sheet as a long-term liability under long-term business loans, subcategory note payable. So that's the main general thing here with these categories here. So it's, relatively straightforward, but it's very limiting and sometimes kind of confusing, especially where they put the current assets under other accounts here. And then, but they put the liabilities together where you can select between current and long. So I don't know if this is very straightforward, but again, it's hard for me to get out of my frame of mind of having an account in mind, and maybe to business owners who aren't incredibly accounting tech savvy might be, maybe this is very straightforward to you and makes more sense. I'm not sure, but this is the, there's the general outline and when you would choose what accounts for. I think the main thing though is fully understanding what account you're trying to create. Again, income, expense, cost of goods sold, other income, other expense on your profit and loss, or you're trying to create an asset, liability, or equity. And it breaks down between short-term and long-term asset, short-term and long-term liability, and different equity accounts. So I think it's, no matter how they phrase this and make it straightforward, I still think it's important for you to fully understand what exact type of account you're trying to create. And then from there, it's just figuring out where to find it using these kind of cues here. So last one would be equities. And So that's relatively straightforward. So you click on this owner's investments or expenses, and then you put it under one of these categories. So you have the personal expenses, owner draws, other, these equity accounts. So that's straightforward. So now, and again, so everything that I showed you here is under the business view account. And I'm also going to show you, if you switch over to accountant view, what it looks like, because it gives you, when you go to the accountant view, it gives you more options to because it's very limited doing it this way. But again, it's more straightforward. So they really, I think one of the things they're going for is to try to really eliminate the possibility of people making big mistakes in their books. So that's kind of why I think that they're going for the thing of making it very limited, because the more limited it is, the less chance that someone has to make big mistakes. But what we'll go over next is that if you have a fuller understanding of this and you want to have the option to create different subcategories or different new parent accounts, like for expenses, for example, then this is how you can do that. So again, if you go on the gear icon here in the top right and then go to switch to accountant view, it'll switch you over. And the chart of accounts here will look the same, but whenever you hit new here, then it looks completely different. And so what it looks like here on this screen, when you're looking at it, the accountant view, and again, this is new too. The accountant view used to be different, and I'm not a big fan of this one either, but again, we have to learn how to use it. So it is what it is for now. But how it's broken out here. So before you put the name in or anything, they ask you first of where you're going to save the account under, what category type it is. And if you first just hit this down arrow or search for one, it'll show all of them. Or what you can do is hit one of these main accounts first, and then it limits what it shows you when you hit this down arrow. This is pretty much what I do every time if I'm not searching for one. So let's just go in order here. But again, this is the order we're going in. So profit and loss, income and expenses, and including in expenses is the cost of goods sold. And then you have the asset accounts, which is banks, and then also current assets and fixed assets, which is in here. And then you have your liabilities, which includes credit cards, current liabilities, long-term liabilities, and then you have your equity accounts. So everything from here to the left, basically just these two, are profit and loss accounts, and everything here over are your balance sheet accounts. So let's say, again, we're putting in an income account. So when you hit income here, it shows you this little preview here of your current income accounts and how they're listed with the parent accounts and the sub accounts. So here we have a parent income account, and then we have different parent accounts with that. And then we have the consulting sales as a sub account, because that's what we created earlier when we were looking at the business expense. Now let's say, for example, let's say because in the business view, we can only create sub accounts for sales. Let's say now we want to create a whole separate line on the P&L for a different sales item, and we don't want to put it under a sub account or as a sub account. So what we would do is we'd hit this arrow, and what we would actually do is choose income here, and that would essentially be the parent account. But really, all it is the main account on your profit and loss. So it's just saying it's an income account. All of these are actually parent accounts, and then this is the only sub account here. So if you hit income here, and I'll show you what that looks like whenever you go after we create it and put it on the chart of accounts. So let's just hit income here. And then, so we have the tax form section here. This used to be details. I like that. I think it was made straightforward more so before, rather than changing it to tax form section. And a lot of these sometimes don't even really match up to what you're actually creating. Again, what I think they might be going for maybe is if they're doing integrations to bring your numbers over automatically into some sort of tax software, maybe this is helping that process, but I'm not entirely sure. But let's say it's a product income, then gadget sales or whatever you want to make it, and then you can put a description if you want. And then, so what it shows here, which is nice, is that it shows you a kind of example here of what it's going to look like before you save it in terms of how it looks in your on your profit and loss, and also in your chart of accounts. So you'll see here that it's listed as this whole separate parent account as an income account. So now you have the ability, using the accountant view, to actually create an entirely separate line item on your profit and loss that's not put under another parent account. So we can hit save here. Now let's go under income here, so I can kind of explain a little bit more of what we were looking at in that screen. And so, and let's duplicate a tab here actually and look at it. So whenever we were looking before, and what we wanted to do was create a separate income account on your profit and loss that's separated from all the other ones, and it's not a subcategory or a sub account. Like, so this, for example, would be a parent account and then the sub account, but all of these other ones are separate income accounts that are parent accounts, and that's what we wanted to create. But in order to do that, what we had to choose whenever we hit this down arrow here is we actually had to choose an income account. So it almost kind of looks like we're making it a sub account because we're putting it under income. But all this means when we're putting save under income here is that it's saving it as an income account. So again, I think it's kind of confusing, but that's the way it's set up currently. So that's when you would choose that. And then if you wanted to make it an other income account like we discussed before, then what you would do is still choose income here, and then you would scroll down here, and then you'd put it under this bulk other income account here. And then if you put it under this one, then you start creating the sub accounts that we talked about in the business view. And so it's a little confusing, but the ones that are all the way to the left aren't sub accounts at all. They're just parent accounts, and it's just basically telling you what kind of income account it's putting it under. And then if you choose one of these, that's when you start creating sub accounts. So let's go ahead and cancel all that. Now let's look at expenses. So expenses here, save account under. So because we hit expenses, it switches it between cost of goods sold and expenses. And again, this can be a little bit confusing, but again, these ones that are all the way to the left are the main groups. And if you choose those, then you're creating a new parent account under that category. If you choose any of the other ones, like any of these ones, for example, then what you would be doing is creating a subcategory underneath that parent account, like we did in the business view. So if you want to create a new expense account, parent account, because we're talking about here looking at the accounted view, then the only ones you'd want to choose here is either this top goods cost of goods sold here or this bulk expenses account here. It's the only two you'd want to choose if you want to create a brand new parent account using this method. So let's say we just want to do expenses here. Again, you can choose the tax form here. Sometimes it doesn't always fit. And a lot of times maybe for utilities and electric, you create sub accounts. But for this case, let's say we just want to create a separate expense account for this, for electric. So then here we see kind of what it looks like under expenses, but then if you hit save, then you can scroll down to expenses, and you'll see this electric now is a completely separate line item on your profit and loss under expenses. Again, when we were looking at the business view before, we wouldn't have this option to do this. You'd have to put this new category under one of these other already created for you categories. So now the difference now when we start looking at some of these balance sheet accounts, like banks, for example, is that now we have the option to start creating sub accounts if you want to for bank or credit card accounts. So let's say we have the new bank parent account here, and let's say we want to create some sub accounts in there. So we keep it as checking, and maybe we want to do a checking and a savings, and the savings will be underneath. And so now if we hit save here, because we chose the bank itself as where to save it under, now we see the bank that we entered before, and now we have the option to start entering some sub accounts under there. So maybe you want to have checking and savings under that same bank. So again, we can hit banks here, go under new bank, because that's where we want to create the sub account under is a new bank. So here we're basically choosing the parent account to put this under. Let's say we want to put a savings account there, hit save. Oh, sorry, I messed it up. Let's say, you get my point, but let's say this is checking actually. So now we see that we have the new bank account here, which is the parent account, and then we have the checkings and saving account as subcategories. And I'm not saying necessarily you want to do this, but I'm just giving examples. There is some cases where you legitimately do want to have some sub accounts for banks, but just giving you the choice here in account view that you can start creating subcategories on these balance sheet accounts. Same with credit cards. And again, I want to go over this in another video of how this can be really beneficial to create sub accounts under the same credit card account. So you can put employee name and then put the last four, you put the employee name and the last four of the credit card under that same parent credit card account. And because we chose save under the credit card account here and hit save, then it actually creates it as a sub account and not just a brand new credit card account, which again is the only option we had looking at it in the business view. So here we see the parent credit card account, and then we see the different employee accounts. We can create as many of these as we want, all under the same credit card account. So now let's look at some assets here, looking at more on the balance sheet again. And again, the main big difference and advantage here for looking at it as the accountant view is now we can create entirely different and new parent accounts on the balance sheet for this. Because again, before looking at it in the business view, we can only save assets as sub accounts under already created asset accounts. But let's say we want to create some brand new asset accounts on the balance sheet. So again, going over now into the accountant view, now you have the option to do that. And in order to do that, let's say fixed assets, for example, again, so these are the main bulk categories here that are all the way to the left. So you have the accounts receivable, other current assets, and then fixed assets, and then everything else is sub accounts. And then you have the other assets listed down here as well. But let's say we want to create a brand new fixed asset and we don't want to create it under a sub account under one of these other ones. Then you would hit this fixed assets here, put in whatever the category is, and then you can create an entirely separate fixed asset for line on your balance sheet. And you can even make it something like this, where it's just the computer itself separately. So you can hit save here, and then you go down to fixed assets, and then you'll see the brand or the entirely separated by itself fixed asset on your balance sheet. And again, same thing with liabilities. If you want to create entirely separate ones without being boxed in order to only create sub accounts, same thing with equity accounts. Here we have the option to, rather than only putting it under an already created account as a sub account, you can create brand new equity accounts. And this can be really useful when you start getting into tracking. If you're tracking shareholders or stocks, things like that, then this is that's when it can become really useful to create separate equity accounts for things like that. So I think I talked enough in this video. Just as an overview, again, I think for the most part, a lot of you might have to be switching between the two different views. The good thing about the business view with the new chart of accounts entry system is that it would really give you a hard time to make mistakes because they don't allow you to create really new accounts. But it's also very limiting because you only have the option to put accounts under already created accounts. You don't have really the option to create a brand new account or brand new category on any of your reports. And so, but if you feel comfortable enough and know that you really want to do that, that's when you can switch over to the accountant view, and that's when you can create brand new separate accounts on your profit and loss and on your balance sheet. And again, I think the main thing, if you're looking at mostly the business view here, I think the main thing is to get a full understanding of what actual account type you're trying to create, and then knowing which category here to choose in order to know that you're creating that kind of category. And a way to test that is to, once you create it, to actually find it in your chart of accounts, just to make sure, because here it's more laid out, especially if you're sorted by type here. It's laid out more straightforward to where you know exactly what type it is, and it's listed by the balance sheet accounts and everything. So that's a good way to kind of test that you chose the right account, is by finding it again here in the chart of accounts. You can just use the search bar to find it quickly if you want, and then looking at the type here, and then making sure that it should be an other income, or it should be just an income, or it should be a fixed asset, or a short term, or a current asset. So that's a way to kind of check that, because again, it could be sometimes confusing looking at this screen. All right, so I want to thank you for watching my video, or my videos, if this isn't my first video that you're watching. And I wanted to give a quick update. So one of my big goals for this upcoming year is to grow my email newsletter list. And the reason for that is because I always want to be able to provide you guys with free training content, such as this video, for example. And I don't always want to rely on social media algorithms such as YouTube. So having this email list, I have in a direct communication with you in order to always be able to provide, no matter what happens in the social media realm, I'll always be able to provide directly to you these kind of resources. And if you are interested, so here's the link up here. So it's essentially -intentional.com/newsletter. And of course, it'll be linked in the description. And I do apologize if you have trouble reading this. If you do, you can go to this link and it's written out on a web page of all the details of what this is. What I ask of you to give is your first name and your email address. And if you do that, then what you'll initially receive whenever you sign up is I have a 1-hour QuickBooks Online training webinar session that I did. So for my local Chamber of Commerce here. And then also too, I have a business foundation PDF, I call it. And so I got a lot of requests for people who are initially starting up their own small business, so kind of what they need to do from a legal and kind of accounting standpoint to get everything set up, such as opening up an EIN, using that EIN to open up a separate business bank account, setting up your bookkeeping and accounting software, things like that. And I know most of you probably already have your own small business set up, but it could still be beneficial because you can use this as a guide to make sure that that foundation is there. And if it's not, then you can start setting it up at any point, really. And then also too, so the daily sales checklist. So one of my most popular videos is a daily sales entry method of using clearing accounts in QuickBooks Online to enter sales. And so I have a checklist of the accounts for that, so you'll receive that as well if that would be beneficial for you. And then ongoing, so my plan is to send just one email a month at the end of every month. What those emails will include is, most importantly, so these type of videos that I'm already creating on YouTube, I'll be linking those and sending those directly to your email. So again, we don't always have to rely on social media algorithms. And for the time being, these videos will include, of course, QuickBooks Online training videos, but also too, I'm going to start introducing more of small business and entrepreneur management accounting type videos. So talking about creating goals for your business and creating monthly budgets in order to align with those goals, and so things like that. So, and also too, links, resources, and updates to anything in the small business accounting and finance world, just to keep up to date on what the changes in the industry and how those affect small business owners on a day-to-day basis. So I'll also be including those. And then finally, last, I'll be including some travel and adventure updates on my own personal front in these emails. And so the reason for that, one of them is to keep me accountable so I don't get too comfortable, because I believe one of the big things that's important for small business owners is to have a why and a reason as to why you have your small business in the first place, in terms of how to support you and your own goals. So of course, you know, a big part of your small business is helping others in certain ways, but I also believe it's important to have a vision of how your business is going to support you on a personal front. And I know this isn't everyone's goal, but my hope is that if I send these updates on these goals, so like one of them, for example, is to travel to all 50 states. Depending on when you're watching this video, so right now I'm at state 45 out of 50, and then I'm flying to Hawaii in 2 weeks, and that'll be state number 46. And my hope is by the end of this year, I'll be able to go to all 50 states. So that'll be one of the updates, for example, per month, is what state I'm at, what number, and what my plans are and where I've been. And I know that that's not everyone's goals, or that's not even what everyone's interested in, is travel and adventure. But I just wanted to hopefully maybe give some inspiration, and at the very least give some reminders on a monthly basis to have your business support you and your personal goals. Because even if your goal is to spend more time with your kids, more time with your family, or just more leisure time, because I know from experience and from myself and from working for a lot of small business owners, is they initially have this personal goal where they want to have their business support them personally, and then they get so caught up in the day-to-day and the growth and everything of their business that they forget to actually make time in order to do these type of things for your personal life. So my hope is, again, maybe some inspiration, hold myself accountable, but also to remind you again on a monthly basis to take some time to think about why you're creating your business and growing your business and how it's going to support you in your own personal or family life. Again, I really thank you guys for watching, and if you are interested in this, again, here's the link here, and I'll provide it down below. Thanks again.